Just before we get going tonight on the actual council meeting, the CAO, Kathy Lalonde, we have something to read. We had an extremely stressful week last week, which everybody knows about, dealing with the membership of the fire hall and trying to work that through this system and trying to protect the island and a whole bunch of it. Anyway, there was a lot of emotion, and it was a very trying time for our staff here. So Kathy just has something she wants to say, and she's not feeling very well, so she's probably going to leave after that, but just go ahead.
Thank you, Gary. This is I've already given a copy of this to the undercurrent. This is an open letter to the Bowen Island community. We try and do this without crime. I am writing this letter to express my concern about the personalization of the dispute between BIM and the volunteer fire department membership, specifically the impact it is having on municipal staff. Many staff are facing varying degrees of anger and verbal abuse in the community. I want to be clear that this is not being undertaken by the volunteer fire department. They are not involved with this. This is other community members. It is not my place to speak to the stories of other staff. I can only tell you my story. On July 21st, my husband was diagnosed with lung cancer, and we were told he had 6 months to live without treatment. Since that time, we have gone through a nightmare of numerous inconclusive biopsies, hospital stays, and differing diagnoses. 3 weeks ago, he began treatment for a lung condition in the hopes that it would help. His health continues to decline. He has lost 50 pounds in 3 months. I returned to the office on Monday, September 30th. Since my return, I have been subjected to an escalating level of verbal aggression, personal attacks, and other humiliating actions. I have been verbally abused and threatened at Municipal Hall. I have been spat upon on my way to work by somebody I do not know, somebody who is not a member of the volunteer fire department. I have been subjected to written abuse on social media. I am experiencing an old-fashioned shunning by some members of this community. I tell you this so you can understand the human cost of this systematic, personalized harassment. Perhaps I could have endured it better without my husband's ill health, but I doubt it. I am shattered. I do not want this to happen to anyone else. I am concerned for the emotional and mental well-being of our staff, our volunteer firefighters, and council members. I am troubled by the toxicity, the personal attacks, and the lack of respectful dialogue in this community. I have confidence that the volunteer firefighters' dispute will be dealt with through an equitable and transparent process agreeable to all parties, including the firefighters. I have faith that the behavior of a few does not represent the broader community. I know Bowen Island is a respectful, compassionate, and loving community. During this challenging time, please show kindness and respect to all parties involved. Consider the human cost. Thank you, Kathy. Can I say something?
Sure.
I just want to remind everybody in the wake of this that we are part of a participatory democracy, and that everybody has a chance in the community to participate in the decisions that we make and the way we run the municipality. And that's the public input, third of the pie. Another third of the pie is the policy and direction that we elected folks provide. And the third is the professional expertise of staff. Whatever's going on, they put themselves in the front line, and they're deserved a safe workplace environment. So I'm not thinking that anybody in this room might be part of any of this, but if anybody can think of any way to help us, support the ideas of civility and democracy and the ideas of constructive public participation, then please help us spread the word and help us maintain municipal services and improve them, as I know staff want to, and help us get through these tough times. So that's just a little blurb from me to fill up a little space.
All right, well said, Sue Ellen. It's a very divisive community. It's very hard on the entire community what's been going on. Needless to say, we have a process and we will engage in that process, and hopefully we'll come out better on the other side. So, back to our regular council meeting, and I'll call it to order. And the approval of the agenda, late items, Hope?
There's 2 late items.
Okay.
Item 3.6, just a response from the chief financial officer in relation to a letter from Glenn Pierce in relation to the permissive tax exemption bylaw.
Okay.
As well as item 5.1, a letter just in regard to the DBP 06.
Okay, we're done. Thank you very much.
That's right.
Anybody have anything they want to add or subtract or?
Yeah, it's items 7.3 and 10.1. They both pertain to the fire hall.
Yes.
We have a lot on the agenda today, and I want to make sure we have a good, fruitful discussion on that. I think we're not going to be able to have that tonight, and it's my recommendation that we pull 7.3 and 10.1 from the agenda.
Defer them.
We can defer them or pull them, whatever we want to do with that.
Can defer. Any further?
I'll second.
You do. Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of the deferral? Those 2 items will be deferred. Thank you, Rob. Okay, Hope, you got that?
If you defer, you need to defer to it.
Oh, you need that.
So you can just pull them from the agenda, you don't need to
pull them with the intent of bringing them back when it's appropriate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Then I
good.
second the amended.
You need to support
Motion
the
to
agenda with the removal of those 2 items.
Yeah.
And the addition of the on table.
Okay, so the approval of the agenda as amended then?
Yes.
Thank you, Michael. Second for Rob, and all in favor? Thank you. That is unanimous. And public comments? Oh,
Just one of Glenn
Okay.
Pierce in
Okay.
regards to the tax proposal.
thank you. Glenn?
Hello, everyone. Sorry, this is my first time doing this.
Okay.
I don't know what I'm doing.
Don't worry about it.
So I've prepared my statement, if I can keep my fingers in. Okay. I'd just like to voice my opposition to the municipal tax cut the taxes that are being cut from the budget by the exemption of certain nonprofit organizations. While I'm sure those organizations are doing excellent work, and I don't dispute that in any way, it's my understanding that they don't provide municipal services such as police or fire coverage or water treatment infrastructure or any of those sorts of things. My main concern actually is not the value of the funds, albeit they're somewhat substantial at $50,000. I think it's $50,000 per year. It wasn't super clear to me. But rather the means by which they influence the perception that municipal services can be replaced by non-municipal entities. Where I'm from, people oftentimes say, well, for-profit entities are more valuable than government services, or the government's inefficient or something like that. And it just seems like this sort of supports that cause, which I don't really feel comfortable with. I believe this is something that's been ongoing, and it would be difficult for those organizations to suddenly absorb a change to that, but it would be my position that we should, as a municipality, consider phasing this out in some fashion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? And that's it, Hope? Okay, thank you. Consent agenda, does anybody have anything they want to pull out of the consent agenda? That's a change. Last call. All right, somebody move the
I'll move
agenda.
the council approve the items as outlined in the October 15, 2019 consent agenda.
Thank you. Second for Michael, and all in favor? Thank you, that is passed. Now, David Wrench. You've been waiting very patiently. Step right up here.
Thank you. On behalf of the Royal Canadian Legion, I'd just like to give you people copies. The Governor General was presented this morning, and as soon as he's been presented, we're allowed to give these copies to municipal, elected municipal officials. The rest of us, ordinary people, can't wear them for another week. I can't wear one either.
Can we wear
Very
ours?
nice.
You may wear them today.
Thank you. I'll try not to get
They're very easy to lose.
Well, the trick to keeping them is you cut a little piece off an elastic band, you put it on there, you push it through, and then it won't come off.
Okay. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. Okay, so we're gonna move right on to our delegation. Julie Sage. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. My understanding is that I have 15 minutes, so I was
Yeah.
hoping to do more or less 10-minute presentation, 5 minutes of question.
Sure.
Hopefully there will be enough.
Yeah.
All right. For being realistic, the observation that our community relies almost exclusively on the mainland for food supply, combined with the fact that our community's exposure and vulnerability to the intensifying climate change disruptions is alarming. In an attempt to respond to this alarm, we, Bowen Island Food Sovereignty, wanted to explore. If you could sit down, we could see your slide. I won't sit down, but I can do this. Is that better? Okay. So, as a group, we wanted to explore how Bowen could adapt and move towards a more resilient food system. For us, the main driver of our work was to demonstrate the potential that our community holds in building resilience, but also to inspire action. The premise of our work was that working with the dynamics of the local food system requires to broaden the scope and to consider natural resource management, land use planning, as well as biodiversity conservation, since food production relies on it, so does our community resilience in the face of climate change. Our work started in February, and after several months of participatory research and engagement with key stakeholders of the community at large, and 2 climate conversations, we're happy to present some of our findings. And tonight I'd like to focus on some aspects of our work, but also the response of the community during the climate conversations, and highlight how our approach could possibly support Bowen Climate Action Plan. So here is a few excerpts, comments from the public after the first climate conversation, where we presented our work, which is summarized in 2 reports, an agrarian analysis and a communication and engagement report. Pretty positive. I'm not hiding anything from you in the sense that this is a selection, but all the comments we had were really positive. People care and are aware is something that jumps at me and makes me really happy. This is further detail as to how we engage with people. So online surveys, stakeholder workshop, one-on-one interviews, mostly with food producers and gardeners, several newspaper articles in the undercurrent, and a few public presentations, one of which with the president of Regeneration Canada on soil regeneration and carbon sequestration in the soil. So these are the 2 reports, and before we move on, I'd like us to have a common understanding of what we mean by food system. Food system is more or less all the interactions, infrastructures, processes that are involved in feeding a population. For us here on Bowen, and most of Canada and our industrialized world, our food system is mostly globalized, with a lot of social and environmental externalities. There is not a lot of care for our natural resources. In fact, it's mostly exploitative. It's vulnerable, it's threatened by climate change, and it is also threatening in the sense that it's producing a lot of GHG emissions, among other things. And so it's far from circular, and so really what we need to move towards is a more sustainable food system, which needs to be circular, which needs to be more localized, which needs to put people's health and ecological health as a priority in the center. And all in all, a food system that is more resilient, and brings back positive interaction between the environment and agriculture, and between our food system and our community. So this is why we wanted to focus on this, and also because it's got several potentials. Because it's a system, it can also create employment. It can, as I said, have a positive impact on natural resource conservation, and more specifically, there were animations on my presentation, but they're gone, so never mind. The academic definition of food system resilience, which is not a term that is very well known, is the capacity over time to provide sufficient, appropriate, accessible food to all in the face of various and unforeseen disturbances. Now, I'd like to mention that disturbances in our case is mostly climate change, just like what Councillor Hawking presented. We know what these disturbances are going to be thanks to science. We know what the projections for Bowen are likely to be, so how do we anticipate to move toward a more resilient food system? And so part of our work was to identify indicators, not only to assess the degree of resilience, but also monitor progress towards more resilience. And so here they are, 5 of them. They should be seen as measures of climate change adaptation and mitigation. And so food sovereignty, pretty much the right of a community to choose their own food and agricultural system, natural resource conservation and regeneration, be it water, soil, or more generally speaking, ecosystems. Arable land use management more refers to the agricultural land reserve. We have 172 hectares of that on the island. Green waste management is waste reduction, decreasing, having something on the island has the potential of decreasing our waste here on the island, decreasing our GHG emissions, but also to upcycle biomass and nutrients into a resource that can build soil and be an incentive to grow more food. And finally, economic viability. A strong local food economy can be a driver of community economic development. That's a big one. Let's move on because I'm racing here. So the lack of animation makes it not really visible, but the second climate conversation that we did was the visit of Harold Steeves, who is a councillor in Richmond, former MLA, considered as the father of the agricultural land reserve, and is also, I think, still sitting on the board of Metro Vancouver. So before coming to do a talk in this very room, we took him on a field trip on Bowen to Collins Farm, home farm that you see on this picture. For those of you who do not know Harold, he's the second one on the left in this picture. And finally, we also took him to Grafton Gardens, and he did a presentation on what Richmond has been doing, but he also stressed on the fact that there is, based on what he had seen, there is a huge potential on Bowen to have a more vibrant local food system, which was here. All right, that's making it really difficult, but this is one of the things that he presented. Richmond has been leading the way for the past 10 years in terms of climate action via pretty innovative land use planning and preservation of farmland. So what you see here is the Terra Nova Rural Park, which is something referred to as municipally supported agriculture, which was a new term to me. You may know community supported agriculture. There's another thing called municipally supported agriculture. And so Terra Nova is one of those things. South of this picture, there is also a community garden and some sort of farm educational center. An interesting approach in Richmond was to make agriculture allowed and possible in all parts, residential and industrial zones, which is one of the things he presented, and this is actually his slide. And another important thing that he presented was the fact that back in 2015 they had their first anaerobic digester, which was offering as a byproduct really good quality topsoil for organic and regenerative agriculture that was used in the lower mainland. But if you can look at the timeline, you can see that the first step to achieve this was to ban cosmetic pesticides and be able to use yard waste in a safe way and produce an end product, byproduct that was of quality and safety for the residents. And so where does that leave us? How does that fit into what Councillor Hawking presented and what our work has been since February? Some of the things we've been delving in is certainly land use planning and advocacy and sort of building awareness within the community, education, and realizing that not only people are interested, but there is an appetite for more. And so points 7 and 8 are extract of the draft that was presented earlier today, that we think we could probably support, or at least bring ideas forward to have actionable items and to contribute to the community in terms of climate action. And looking at the bigger picture, the Metro Vancouver Climate 2050 Strategic Framework, in a way, the scope of our work is touching on 4 of the 10 issue areas. Because just like when you talk about a food system, you need to have a systemic approach. And so nature and ecosystem, land use planning, agriculture and wastes are part of the same system. I'll race through this. We can come back to this later. I just wanted to highlight the agricultural land reserve on the island and the fact that 49% of that belongs to Freeman Regional Park. And I'll move on to our specific asks, which are we would very much appreciate support, administrative support from the municipality in order to apply to bigger grants. We're limited in funding, and being able to apply for large grants such as the ones offered by the Vancouver Foundation or the Real Estate Foundation would help us tremendously and hopefully would benefit the community. We cannot do that without your support. And secondly, I think we can offer advice and possibly expertise on some of the aspects of climate emergency, composting, pesticide regulation for safe composting product being some of them. We also work on regenerative agriculture, and we just want to offer the work that we've been doing and also hoping that we can carry on and keep building momentum. Because again, we found out that not only there is interest from the community, but people want to do more and want to know what to do. So it's not only an ask from the municipality to have a plan, it's also enabling families and individuals to grow more food or preserve natural resources, collect rainwater, build topsoil that will benefit to So that's pretty much it. I just want to conclude with this, which is a quote. The assumption that we can secure our food needs from distant lands also assumes that they are able to do what we cannot, maintain and work their farmland. Just food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. I was at one of the presentations, the earlier presentation, and it was fantastic. I mean, it was really good. And just the awareness on Bowen, I think that there is help out there. People might not think they can do it. There's not a lot of agrable land, unfortunately, on Bowen, and we have to really take care of it. But I love the idea of the regenerative soil operation too, and getting the soil back up to where it should be.
And that our soil is a natural resource, and so we can take
Yeah. But as a resource, I mean, the food sovereignty is really good, and we have to continue it along. We'll have a roundtable here as well.
Well, I'll start off. Thank you very much. And I was part of the walkabout at Collins Farm. I'm happy to facilitate that. And I have a question. It's about the word sovereignty. And it's just because I'm trying to understand it. I get sustainability. I thought maybe it would be called food sustainability. That fits with Islands Trust and the whole point of the Islands Trust, which is to, you got to be more careful with an island, and you live within your means on an island. The idea of trying to protect and preserve the island's resources so that everybody can go on together, humans and nature alike. And then I thought, well, maybe I kept writing it down as food security. But no, it's not, it's sovereignty, so I just wanted to ask you the question, what is the take on sovereignty?
Yeah. Well, first of all, and I know because the term sovereignty in Canada is somewhat contradictory or loaded. The term food sovereignty is an international term that is used by an organization called BYLAWS. And if you look into the pillars of food sovereignty, there is actually a definition, a pillar that is addressing indigenous groups. This is in the report in one of the appendices, so I'll let you look into it. The question of food security or food sovereignty is a really interesting one, and I'll take a really extreme example to illustrate food security. Food security would be you're in, the Sahel, a country of the Sahel, like Mali, for instance, and you need food. USAID delivers food. This is your food security, you have access. But food security doesn't actually consider the rest, doesn't consider where the food is coming from, doesn't consider who grew the food, in which conditions. And so food sovereignty is a more comprehensive approach, I would say. And finally, sustainability is a valid term. Food sustainability is a valid term. However, you can't talk about sustainability when you're considering something like soil that is degraded, or you're sustaining something that is degraded. And so that's why regenerative tends to have more meaning. So,
Thank you. That's more than I was hoping for. That's great. No, I just mean, it's interesting.
A lot of
how we
knowledge
get-
there.
Well, it helps me put it into the
Context.
context of what you're asking for. Thank you.
David?
Thanks, Julie. Thanks. And I haven't read your report yet. I've skimmed a bit of it, but I will do that as soon as I can. I just want to add a little bit more to the concern about food. And that, so I'm on a committee called the Lower Mainland Flood Management Strategy Leadership Committee. And we had a workshop, a 2-day workshop last week, looking at floods coming down the Fraser from climate change and also sea level going up. And you think, okay, that doesn't really mean that much to Bowen Island, but a significant flood now, with the water that's available now, would damage our infrastructure enormously, would cause somewhere between $20 to $30 billion of damage, and would wipe out a whole lot of the agriculture that we have in the Lower Mainland right now. So it just sort of adds to the importance of what you're doing.
thank you.
Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, thanks, Julia. That's a great presentation. One of the things I always sort of try to draw is what can we do as a municipality to, and I think we've got a really good potential for great collaboration, and, you know, around the support for grant writing, whatever, you know, our support for you guys, I think that's something that we'd probably all be very keen to help you out with. So that, the one thing that you sort of touched on as actionable items that your organization could recommend to the municipality, and I think that'd be very valuable, even from the perspective of bylaws we're setting, for instance, around having chickens in your backyard, to I know we're doing a lot of work right now on-island composting to get rid of this insanity of shipping it to wherever, Pemberton, or wherever we're shipping it, yeah. And also, especially around water as well, we have now two and a half, maybe 3 stage 4 alerts right now. I know Enswell Farm 4 years ago, they were trucking in water during the drought, which is not going to make farming very economical. So I guess the message is it would be fantastic for your organization to like let us know, like even the pesticide thing, like how that's going to impact our on-island composting program, for instance.
Right, and then another thing that I would love to work on, and I think our delegation would love to work on, but I won't speak for them, is now that we have, you know, a rural status, I would like to see if that puts us in a different category when it comes to meat inspection, regulation, processing, because what we found out, mostly during the interviews, that people would love to have more animals on the island, but making the processing and having to send the animals in the lower mainland makes it outrageously expensive. So whether it's chickens or, I don't know what else, pigs or cows, looking into this with a cautionary word that it's not about intensive animal farming, and that, you know, you need to look into what sort of bylaw would that be, and what would be the limitations to avoid any negative effects.
Not a Bowen slaughterhouse, please.
Abattoir, please.
But I would like to point out that for some reason our work got into the ears of people on North Bender, and I had a discussion yesterday with somebody from the community who's trying to do the same. So looking at exactly the same issues around composting, around the lack of soil, and looking at how they can build food system resilience. So then the next logical step is to look at the possible synergies with other islands of the Islands Trust.
Yeah, I think it's really important to get our organics back into the soil again. You know, that would be an amazing piece of work. Anybody else? All right, well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Julie. And could you make a formal request to Mayor and Council?
Yeah.
A written request on your two asks there, and then we would certainly work on them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're doing the second editions of those reports to get rid of tenacious typos, and we'll be mailing them to you so that you can read them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done. Okay, business arising from the minutes, Emma Chow, 971C replaced. I am.
Hey, Mayor and Council. So I haven't prepared a presentation for this, mainly because staff is recommending a deferral of consideration for this application until the October 28th council meeting. Reason being that since the previous council meeting, several concerns have been raised by neighbors, and staff is working with the applicant and the neighbors to resolve the concerns. Mainly this will involve landscaping, and the time since the previous meeting was not enough for the applicant to secure a landscaper.
So,
Requesting a deferral for more time.
so it's ongoing.
Yes.
And I'll read the recommendation. The council defer consideration of development variance permit DVP 06-2019 till October 28, 2019 council meeting. Put up and all in favor. Thank you. Deferred. Don't go too far. Emma Chow and development variance permit DVP 11-2019 1460 Eagle Cliff.
have a presentation for this one. Introducing application DBP 11 2019 for 1460 Eagle Cliff Road. This property is located in the Eagle Cliff neighborhood on the east side of the island as shown here on this map. This is quite a small lot. It is under 0.2 acres, and as you can see, the area that is outside of setbacks is very small. We're looking at about 2,500 square feet. However, the slopes on this lot are very, very steep, and the only real buildable area on this lot is actually in the northwest corner, almost entirely within the required setbacks. The applicant is proposing to build a new house anchored on this area. It's an interesting proposal. The blue parts highlighted here are parts of the structure that will actually be anchored to the bedrock, with the remaining part of the structure mostly cantilevered off of those anchored portions. This is the elevation viewed from the south, so from this side of the structure, and as you can see, only a portion of it is actually anchored, and the remainder is cantilevered. This is the view from Eagle Cliff Road, and the view from the north, and the view from the west, which is the laneway access side. This is the parking area access from the lane. The applicant has also supplied some photographic illustrations of this proposed siting. This is seen from the neighbor to the south, essentially this elevation. As you can see, the site slopes down quite steeply towards Eagle Cliff Road down here, and it is looking out towards Howe Sound. This is from the other side of the structure, from the northwest, and this is the location of the laneway will be built here, accessing parking right here. The applicant has also taken photos from 3 of his neighbors' decks, and as you can see from this neighbor, which is above, you cannot see the structure at all. This is from the neighbor to the north, and it is mainly this portion of the structure that will be within the required setback. From the neighbor to the south, west, the portion that is in the setback is actually not visible from the deck. So the applicant is requesting a reduction in the required setback from 7.5 meters to 0 meters, essentially building up to the lot line. Internal referrals of this application yielded serious concerns for Public Works, mainly around drainage and sight lines. As you can imagine, there was concern on visibility if this laneway were to be developed, that this would obstruct sight lines. However, the applicant has submitted preliminary engineering designs showing vehicle turning radius with the largest design vehicle, fire truck, and also a letter of reassurance from an engineer saying that this would not be an obstruction to sight lines. Public Works has found the letter to be satisfactory to proceed with the development variance permit. However, further engineering details will be required for construction and to get permits at that stage. So given the constraint on this lot and that Public Works is satisfied with the information provided, and also that the applicant has submitted letters of support from his neighbors, staff is recommending that council go ahead with public notice for this application.
Thank you. Any questions? David?
Yeah, thanks, Emma. I tried to figure it out from the report, but now you've told me a whole lot. But that, so the lane, if you can go back to one of them, that shows, yeah, so the lane from the photograph, it doesn't exist right now.
No.
And so adjacent properties, if you go back to the map, if there's no lane, how are there adjacent properties?
Can you,
Oh,
yeah, have you got the map that's on our,
Well, that map's good enough for me.
oh, I wanted to
The
see this
context
one.
map.
I'm trying to get
Oh,
it.
it's- Yeah, it's very hard to see the lot lines.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could see the surrounding properties in the report context map better, the lot lines, it's hard to see from this. But all of the surrounding lots are developed except for the direct lot right here.
So what's since that laneway isn't there,
How are they gonna get to the laneway?
The
so
laneway.
the laneway connects to the other road, I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, so the laneway is a municipal road allowance that actually connects all the way through to,
Okay, yeah.
from Upland Trail on this side to Highland Trail on the other side. However, only a portion of it is developed up here to access these lots here.
Okay.
And it stops,
So he's gonna build this piece here?
he wants to build a small piece off of Upland Trail,
Oh, I see.
which is on this side.
On that side, okay.
Yeah.
'Cause
So Upland
I-
Trail's already developed here down to Eagle Cliff, and he wants to build off of that municipal road allowance to get to this property. Because the access from Eagle Cliff is just so steep.
Right.
Can we have a map that shows where Upland Trail is next time?
I think it's,
Is that this funny jog here?
yes,
Oh,
yeah.
okay, 'cause it's not
the
labeled.
wider-
So that's an actual existing road?
Yes. It's runs across a bit of an easement right now. It doesn't exactly follow the municipal road allowance, but there's
Oh,
an
that's
existing.
not unusual for out there.
Yeah, so no, go ahead. And then Rob, yeah.
My question is, it's seismic safety? Is that something that we check? Because I'm just thinking if there was an earthquake, what happens to that building and does it slide down the hillside? And impact others? I'm just wondering about whether I've never seen that.
Geotech or something.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if that's something that will be looked into by the municipality, or is that something?
That's usually required at building permit stage
Building permit.
to prove geotechnical support.
Stability? But and that includes seismic?
Depending
Well, the
on-
stability of the slope.
Right. Okay. It just seems when it's all cantilevered out like that,
Yeah.
that it might be more than geotechnical. It's not. I just know that big buildings have other seismic restrictions to do with glass and to do with what if things fall. And I'm not sure that's covered in the kind of standard geotechnical thing, so maybe that's something you could check. It's a concern I've got.
Okay, as far as I understand it, it would be meeting the BC building code. So if there are any seismic requirements, it would be whatever's under the BC building code. We, as municipal bylaws, don't have additional.
Very good, thank you. That was basically my question, thank you.
Rob, please.
Yeah, and then just a bit more on the access to the property on the lane side. So right now, the bottom of the property borders onto Eagle Cliff Road, correct? So they're proposing building on municipal right-of-way, a lane up to the house through the
Yes.
back. And how do the neighbors feel about that? And is there any tree cutting that's happening? What's that gonna look like?
I believe the applicant has already received permit to cut down trees in the municipal right-of-way.
So
And-
that happens before we do this?
I think they've already cleared,
They've already cleared the road.
is my
Mhm.
understanding. That permit would have been issued by Public Works, that's what I've been told. And during the site visit, the laneway is cleared. They do need more permits to actually construct the lane, like the actual paved road.
Is that gonna come to us, or is that doesn't come to us then?
It's operational.
Who was next here? Michael, sorry.
How big is the house once completed?
It's a good question. Sorry, I don't have it memorized.
I mean, it's a small lot, so, I mean,
Yeah,
roughly,
it's-
roughly.
It's pretty much maxing out the lot coverage.
Yeah.
He's talking about a building envelope of 1897 square feet in this drawing that's here.
Sorry, right?
It is, It was submitted information, just, it's fine. Well, it would be,
Sorry, Emma, I didn't mean to make life difficult, just roughly.
That's okay. Right here it has 1,897 square feet.
Okay, so it's about 1,900 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is it fair to say that this is a small lot and someone wants to build I won't say a small house, but not a huge house. And they're also having to go to some very considerable architectural elements to make this work.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously to the advantage of their neighbours, from what I can see, because what they've taken great care to do through the architecture is to protect the house from their surrounding neighbours, and I presume that's why they've got the neighbours' support, is it? I mean, it is not intrude from what I can see from what your presentation here on the neighbours' sight lines.
Mm-hmm. It's very minimal impact. because of
Minimal
the slope.
impact. Neighbours are supporting it.
Mhm.
And to create this size house on this lot, they're having to go to something which can only be described probably generally as extremely architectural to make it work.
To get the square footage,
Yeah,
I believe so.
Yeah. And to develop the laneway properly as well. Well, obviously a lot of care and thought's gone into this, and with given the fact that the neighbours support it, it's hard to know why you wouldn't.
Yeah, Rob, go ahead.
One more quick comment, Emma, just on the laneway again. Who's gonna be responsible for maintenance of that laneway?
That would be to be decided by Public Works. Generally, the municipality does not take on maintenance of these laneways unless they serve a certain number of dwellings. So I don't imagine Public Works would take on this lane.
Okay, I mean, that's obviously a consideration, because it looks like it's only gonna be servicing one house by the looks of it. Everybody else has access from the roads. And I don't want us to be stuck maintaining and a tree falls and we gotta go haul it out and gravel or whatever they're doing. So I mean, you know, I think that's pretty important information for us to know when we're making a decision like that. Because I mean, our road budget right now is stretched to the max already, and I don't wanna be adding more on that.
That's a good point, Rob, and I think going forward, that's one thing we'll have to keep an eye on. You know, he does have the option of moving his house forward, which would be quite a bit in the line of sight of both his neighbors. Houses, I think it's better, you have to do real cliffhangers, right? But, yeah, I think we'll move it forward, I can't see any problem with that, it's got a long way to go here. Does anybody want to read the recommendation?
Sure. I'll read the recommendation that notice be given that council will be seeking the issuance of a development variance permit, DVP 11/2019, for the variance of front setback for 1460 Eagle Cliff Road, legally described as Lot C, LMP 12286, Block 6 to 8, DL 1552, PID 018 631 at the November 12th, 2019 meeting of council.
And I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion?
And then there's a bit more.
Yeah, second paragraph.
Second
Oh,
paragraph.
did it hit two or one?
It's
Let's do it all.
one
Let's do it all in one.
Yeah, the council authorized staff to give notice for the consideration of issuance of development variance permit DVP 11/2019 in accordance with section 499 of the Local Government Act to all properties within 100 meters of the legal boundary of 1460 Eagle Cliff Road, legally described as Lot C, LMP 12286, Block 6 to 8, DL 1552, PID 018 631
I'll second that.
All right, that's a second. Now any further discussion? All in favor?
Yeah.
Thank you, that is unanimous. And thank you, Emma.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're moving on to 7.2, Daniel Martin. Development variance permit DVP 14/2019.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So this is the DVP for Area 1 of Lot 2. So for those who have remembered, Area 1 of Lot 2 is this little triangle lot that's located just down the hill off the main road between Vic's and the museum at the corner of Bowen Trunk Road and Seniors Lane. So this isn't hugely readable, but in August of this summer, the municipality announced an intention to dispose of the land to DK Harris Properties Limited for a set amount for the construction of rental housing, or for rental housing development. And then so following that, at the last council meeting, council authorized David Bellringer of DK Harris Properties to act as an applicant to apply for the necessary permits to have in place to prepare the site for development. So David Bellringer has accordingly applied for a development variance permit for this development, and for any building to go ahead, it will need a development permit and subsequently a building permit. So in terms of the variance permit application itself, so this property is located in Area 1 of CD19, which is a comprehensive development zone specific to this lot. So the Area 1 zoning allows for apartment dwelling as a principal use, and then it has an associated accessory commercial uses such as office and retail. And it allows to a maximum of 1.0 floor space ratio and a maximum of 2,500 square meters of floor area. And that can be up to a maximum of 2,200 square meters of residential. And there's a ratio that goes into play in terms of you build some commercial, you get more residential. That's how you max out the residential. And then crucially for this application, the parking requirements are for an apartment dwelling. Our bylaw requires 0.5 spaces per dwelling. And we require 1 space per 40 square meters for the commercial space. And the contours are almost invisible, but the site itself is this triangle, and there's a large flat area at this part of the triangle, and then it comes into a cliff towards the back of the property. So accordingly, the development proposal is to focus most of the development on the flat area. So a large building that fronts Bowen on Trunk Road, that goes a bit into the hillside on this side and constructed partly on the flat, and then a smaller parking area that takes place on the flat. I'm just going to sum it up. There we go. So this site picture is again the same thing. So a flat area at the front of the property. This is standing at the corner of Bowen Road and Seniors Lane. So a flatter area with a hillside in behind. And then again from the other end of Seniors Lane looking down at the ditch of the property, the flat area with the slope on the side. So then this then is a rendering or an image of what the proposed building would look like. So it's a building that's designed to run along Bowen Trunk Road that would step up, so a lower level that's entered from this side, and higher levels that are entered, and higher up as the building steps up the hillside. And also say another element of the development is a desire and an intent to have every level of the building accessible. So flat entry to each level of the building drives some of the design. So you see a higher level come in off of Bowen Trunk Road to have level entry on this side, but then a ramp system to come into that middle, that third floor, digging eats up again part of the flat area of the site. So the development proposal is for 27 residential units, and so in our bylaw that requires 14 parking spaces on site. The size of the commercial unit on the ground floor, right at this corner, would require another 4 commercial spaces, so a total of 18 parking spaces are required. And what the applicant has proposed is providing 8 parking spaces on site, so tucked into this little parking area here, as well as bicycle parking here that in our bylaw reduces the need for 1 of the commercial spaces. So that leads into a variance application for a variance for 9 parking space, a reduction of 9 parking spaces. The applicant is proposing as part of their development to provide 6 off-site parking spaces along Miller Road. So as part of the development to develop that side of Miller Road with curbside parking. So the construction of that would be done under a works and servicing agreement at the applicant's cost that would then be managed by the municipality. So it's in a way of offsetting the parking, especially the commercial parking requirements of providing it off-site. So similar to on Dorman Road at the Village Square development, there's parking along Dorman Road that is not counted in Village Square parking fulfillments, but it's managed by the municipality, but it was built as part of the Village Square development. And so the staff recommendation is that that council receive this application and consider it at the November 12th council meeting, which notice of neighbors.
All right, let's start off, Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. And I know one of the issues with the last development was the high cost of underground parking, so I'm going to be supportive of us relaxing parking requirements as much as possible. I do think it's important that when developers do ask for that they also show something like, for instance, good quality covered bike parking, pedestrian access, yada, 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 so that they are showing that, hey, this is about providing transportation options for people versus just straight on parking, so just with that in there. Any impact on Cross Island Pathway, because it's gonna be going right along there. I don't wanna run into issues where they're building onto that area and then we're stuck not being able to get the bike path up there.
Sure, so there's no, in terms of cross-island pathways up to the front, so there's no vehicle access across, from Bowen Island Trunk Road onto the property itself, and so that's kept, so the vehicle access will come off of Seniors Lane, the existing intersection, and then into the property behind. So there is that pedestrian access off of Bowen Island Trunk to the building itself, but not vehicle access off of Bowen Island Trunk.
Can you put the sketch up?
Yep.
So this would be the path.
Yeah, this is essentially the path, the path on the road, yeah.
Anybody else? So,
I support the reduction of the parking spaces because we've just been talking about taking climate action, and it's so close to Snug Cove, which is within the walkable village concept, and the pedestrian and bus and hitchhiking and all those things are possible there, and bicycling, walking down to the ferry, and so I think that's good. I like the walkability. I like the climate action. I like the ramps and the level accessibility, and I like the bike parking. As someone who often wonders, well, where am I going to put my bike in the cove? My question is about will the fire engines be able to reach? I don't think we've got many 4-story buildings, and I remember discussion about this, but I can't remember the details.
So this was referred to the fire department for comment, and in particular this access.
Yeah.
And haven't received any concerns about the height or the access to it, and more about, in part, I think some of the comments where they like having the two sides of the building access to it, and the building itself is 4-story in places, but in large part, so at this side of the building, it's a 3-story building, at this side, it's a 2-story building.
Right, because the land slopes.
Because the land slopes.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
David?
Gary, I'm happy to support it for all the reasons that we've heard.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I'll second that as well.
Who wants to read it? It's written on.
Not the hackers would be
Sure, oh, thank you.
That notice be given that council will be considering the issuance of development variance permit DVP 14, 2019 for the variance of required off-street parking for Area 1 of Lot 2, legally described as Lot 1, District Lot 490, Group 1, New Westminster District Plan, EPP 68283, PID 030090318 at the November 12, 2019 meeting of council. That council authorized staff to give notice for the consideration of issuance of development variance permit DVP 14, 2019 in accordance with section 499 of the Local Government Act to all properties within 100 meters of the legal boundary of Area 1 of Lot 2, legally described as Lot 1, District Lot 490, Group 1, New Westminster District Plan, EPP 68283, PID 030090318.
Thank you, Hope. Second? Okay, David, we'll take yours. Just before, can you go back to the site? Sorry?
Moved it.
David.
I'll second.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right, yeah, no, you're good. So, I was thinking that, obviously, there's no appetite for a whole bunch more parking here, but there could have been something done up in here. Did you guys ever do that?
Yeah, it's tricky to do. Yeah, we did.
Those
It
are
starts
the
to get
pictures.
really expensive. The slope is pretty close to the main there.
But there seems to be an appetite for reducing the amount of parking in the code, and because it is so accessible, I think that's wise. So, any further discussion? No? Lots of question, all in favor? Thank you, that's unanimous. Okay. Dallas Kerr, okay, we're gonna pull that one. Hold. And we're gonna go on to reports of committees, Chow, and commissions. Raj Hara, Chief Financial Officer.
And Councillor Allison Morris.
And
Well,
These are the minutes.
unfortunately, due to family health issues, missed that meeting, so Roger's gonna have to.
I can just speak to it briefly, just because I know what
Okay.
happened, if that is helpful. So the minutes of the June 18th, 2019 Kobe, what happened was that meeting was held, and immediately after that meeting, the recommendations were to go on a council agenda. And what happens is sometimes in advance of the draft minutes being prepared, the committee recommendations go on the next available council agenda just because they're time sensitive. In this case, they were time sensitive. It was the staff direction to undertake the AAP for the Kobe and to prepare a loan authorization bylaw. So they did not go on, and the remaining recommendations in the minutes just got missed. They never went on a subsequent agenda. So there are a few recommendations that have been dealt with, and then there are 2 recommendations that have not been dealt with by council. If that is clear, and if not, I'm happy to provide further clarification. So
So it's a formality, really.
The one recommendation is that council direct staff to investigate and implement recording and publishing of Grafton Lake water levels to raise awareness and support water conservation. And the second is that the chief administrative officer direct staff to investigate an interim rate increase to Kobe water system user rates and report back to the committee as soon as possible.
Thank you, I'll move that. Second, and question? Yeah, discussion, yeah.
I'm asking about number 2 here, Raj, and this is relating to the investigate an interim rate increase. In past council term, we thought about water conservation and the impact of the current rate structure for Cove Bay, which has the people that use the least water paying the highest rate. And so as people go over that initial quantity, then they pay for it, but at a lower rate. So in a way, for water conservation purposes, it seems backwards, and it doesn't provide any incentive for people, especially at the lowest rate, which might be the most of the users. And so I'm just wondering, will that be looked at as well
We
during this
can look
investigation?
at that as well, but the primary driver behind this recommendation was we have a loan coming on stream for the treatment of the Cove Bay, or for the Cove Bay Water Treatment Center. So rather than having a huge increase in 2 years when the loan needs to be serviced, we implement the increase in stages. So basically part of it this year and then part of it
Phasing it in.
so phase in the increase in rates so that you're not hit all at once. And what we'll do in the interim, or the intention is in the interim, whatever rate increases recommended by the LAC, because that'll go back to the LAC to make a recommendation to council, those funds would be put in reserve until time that loan is going to be serviced.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I thought that was probably the reason.
Yeah.
But I just see the words in the first ask about support water conservation, and I would like to add them to the second one. Maybe that would be the way to do this. Increase Cove Bay water system user rates and support water conservation.
And I also believe that that would probably be just a wiser thing to do. One of the things that our interim director of engineering is recommending is or will be recommending to council as part of the capital projects, is an island-wide master review of our water systems, and it will include reviewing the billing structures as well. So I think it would be wiser to look at that as part of that study rather than looking at just Cove Bay rates in isolation for that.
Yeah, I guess if I may, through the chair, it's just that we haven't passed that yet.
No, we haven't.
And so this could conceivably put, single-family households or people who have to think carefully about how they're going to pay their bills, the ones that use the least water could be carrying more of the burden. And so would it hurt to insert the words, and support water conservation after the words interim rate increase.
Can I say something?
Yes.
We've had around water committee meetings from all the water committees, and they've all raised the issue of the excess rates for excess, the rates for excess consumption should be higher and more penalizing than they are. But the rate increase that Raj is referring to is the one, how much per property on average to service the debt. So instead of having everybody hit with $100 a year from, 2 years from now, $50 this year and
So
$100
this
next
is
year.
per parcel?
Well, I mean, he
Yes.
hasn't figured out how to
Oh,
work this
thank
out
you.
yet, so.
Yeah,
Okay,
so we're looking at the flat rate, not the very, sorry,
debt
yeah.
service.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Raj has answered my question
Yeah,
by
I was
saying
looking at the
per
flat rate
parcel,
and not
flat
the
rate. Okay,
variable.
thank
Yeah.
you, that helps. And then I have one more question.
Sure.
Okay, it relates to the point that some members of the committee brought up, and I've heard in the community over the years, that the Cove Bay water system serves more than just the Cove Bay users, that it also serves the businesses, the school, the ferry lineups, all that kind of thing. And I'm wondering if there's any consideration that the rest of the island could share a little bit of the cost of this water treatment plant. I note that the water from Cove Bay went to, a few truckloads of it went to other parts of the island this summer to support the water shortages in some of the neighborhoods. And in years past, I understand that in drought years, some of the, well, I won't go into that part, but the point is, will the idea of Cove Bay water being significant to every islander on Bowen be considered as you're looking at interim rate increases, or will it be only Cove Bay water users?
Right now, it's a local area service, so we would collect the fee from those parties that directly benefit. However, the rest of the island will pay for the use of water through user fees. So for example, you have public facilities or businesses that will be paying more for water. Their costs of doing business will go up, so the rest of the island will see or be paying for that through I would assume increased operating fees of those businesses as they raise their fees to recover those costs.
Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion?
I'll move the
Okay.
recommendations of council direct staff to investigate it. It hasn't been moved and seconded, has it?
It has been.
Oh, good,
Oh,
then I
that's
don't have to
good.
read
So
it.
did you want them as two separate motions or as one? I think the intent was that they're separate, just
Oh, I was
from the
thinking they
minutes.
Okay.
But, I mean, you could.
Okay, let's split them. So let's go back and split them. So the number one, which everybody understands. Okay, let's just redo that. I'll move it.
Second.
Thank you, Michael. All in favor? Okay, number one is passed. Number two, that the chief administration officer direct staff to investigate an interim rate increase, Cove Bay water system user rates, and report back to the committee as soon as possible. I'll move that.
Second.
Second, Allison, and all in favor?
Okay.
You all right?
Yeah, I was just stumbled over the word committee and it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
And we have a meeting next week, right?
Okay, thank you. Councilors, 9.2, Councilor Hawking and Nicholson, read recommendation from the September 5th, 2019 Environment and Climate Action Advisory Committee meeting.
I missed that meeting, so I'm going to turn it over to Maureen.
Okay, thank you.
I don't really have much more to say. I think the recommendations are fairly, well, they're explicit.
Yeah.
So more a matter of whether council would entertain it.
Okay. So,
I'm going to speak in support of this, of these two motions. The first one seems self-evident to me. If it's not there already, I think it's a good idea. The second one about replacing the culvert on Miller Road. I like the idea of looking at a bridge, investigating, I think is the word. isn't that what it says?
Yeah.
You need to do, investigate. Partly, I would just add a couple of reasons. One of them is that this is a significant wildlife corridor, and it's not just aquatic things like beavers and salmon would be helped by a bridge. They have a hard time with culverts, and of course some salmon do move up through there, up the bridge, but also things like deer and smaller animals that we have on Bowen, squirrels and butterflies. Those kind of creatures can move underneath the bridge, and it encourages their movement for healthy wildlife populations, and it also helps to not have them on the road at night when you might have collisions. So there's a safety aspect there, and there's ways of constructing a bridge so that there's a kind of a little pathway so that animals and bridge inspectors can get into there easily for easy maintenance and inspection. And so those are what I wanted to say about that. Plus, it may be more climate resilient than a culvert that's fixed, and you can't inspect it nearly as easily in terms of how is it doing with the quantities and changes of the water and erosion. So I'm in support of this.
All right, now the thing is this, is the, thank you. There was something else tonight, because I remember when I was reading it over, it could have been in the consent agenda, that we monitor the level of the lake.
That was the motion we just passed.
So what's the difference between monitoring the level of the lake and putting on a very expensive meter?
Because this is not monitoring the level of the lake, it's monitoring the movement between the lake and
How much water comes out of the lake? Into the
It's the flow.
So it's a different measure.
So it gives you a measure of environmental flow.
No bucket test.
All right, I don't understand that, because I thought aren't we sort of looking at the same thing? Is it the impact of our
Well, no, there's a
okay,
certain-
water on that lake?
No, there's a certain amount of water that has to come out of the lake to go into the creek to
Correct.
keep the fish alive.
Yes, yes.
And you either go and have, look at the gauge and how much you're gonna open the orifice up, or you get a bucket and fill it with water and how long it takes to fill.
Yeah.
And to figure out how much is coming out, or I don't know whether the flow meter, that's why it says investigate. I wouldn't be past wanting to vote on a motion to actually install one, because I know how expensive they are. So,
Yeah.
so it's investigating the feasibility.
Yeah, and the bridge affair is gonna be extraordinarily expensive, but we can investigate it, but I just don't wanna spend a whole bunch of time looking at
I
it.
think staff could come back with something pretty quickly on both of these recommendations.
Okay, yeah, if they're able to do that, then I can certainly go along with that.
Just on this is the one where we defer to next year for the culvert replacement, that's the same location, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we already know how much it's gonna cost, so we can compare it to the bridge cost.
Since we're talking about costs, it occurs to me that the upstream and downstream landowner is Metro Vancouver Regional Parks, who has an interest in environmental flows, salmon, wildlife, all the health of the wetlands all around. And they might be willing to help us find grant funding or help us in some other way, like engineering support or something like that. And also that if part of the report could be whether this would help us with climate resilience, there may be more funding available for that kind of thing depending on the upcoming federal election.
Can we embed that in the recommendation?
Well, these are recommendations from that committee. I was prepared to bring up these points when we got the investigation, but
Oh, okay.
Well,
Yeah, that works as long as you're happy with
Yeah.
that.
But it may be worthwhile talking to Metro Vancouver Parks before you start the investigation.
Well, at some point during the investigation.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. They're doing their own work down there trying to deal with those damn beavers. So I'll just read the recommendation
Yeah.
then? Okay. The council directs staff to investigate the feasibility of installing a flow meter at the outlet of at Grafton Lake at the start of Terminal Creek. Whereas the culvert in Miller Road at Terminal Creek is damaged and requires replacing, whereas this culvert services the largest stream on Bowen Island, receives the highest water flows, and crosses a major road, whereas susceptibility to flooding is a concern as washout has the potential to strand a high percentage of the island's population, and whereas a bridge may be better to facilitate beaver damming mitigation than the existing culvert. You can see that we were rolling up all our reasons. Therefore, be it resolved that council directs staff to investigate the feasibility of replacing the culvert on Miller Road at Terminal Creek with a bridge.
Second?
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Oh, yeah.
It's okay.
Okay,
That's fine.
thank you.
Just to confirm,
Unanimous?
that was one motion.
Yeah.
Oh, one, yeah.
All right, thank you. So 9.3, Councillor Cale Morrison-Wyman, recommendation from the September 16th Finance Advisory Committee meeting. Who wants to take that?
I was going to suggest that we perhaps defer this consideration of this recommendation until the next council meeting, because I have a report to council coming on the subject here.
That would be helpful.
The committee
Yeah.
for grants, it'll have background information, and it'll include basically some information about the finance committee discussion as well.
I move that we defer item 9.3 until a report comes forward in the next council agenda.
Yes, it'll be on the next council agenda.
Sorry, October.
October 28th. meeting of
28th,
council.
yes.
October 28th, thank you.
I'll second that.
You want to read that back? Hopefully.
Does the council defer the following motions until its October 28th meeting?
Okay, thank you.
And now,
That sounds
what was
good.
that?
Then Robson and Rob's
Yeah.
primary on it.
Just,
Allison second.
two
Further
points.
discussion? Yeah.
Yeah, one is, I was, and this may be that I haven't been paying attention, but I was surprised to see this come forward from the Finance Advisory Committee. All of our community grants are handled by our Community Grants Committee, so.
Not core fund.
There was a recommendation a little while back, I can't recall what meeting exactly, but the CJAC made a recommendation to council that
These be handled by the finance?
because it was
Yeah.
not really in their mandate and they didn't feel comfortable
That's
doing it.
correct.
Okay, then we may want to make that clear in the policy, because I looked in the policy to see who was handling this process, and it was not clear. And that might be important information for a community organization to know. And then the other is just a little bit of good news, which is that Birch has just been awarded 2 grants. One
Good.
from CMHC, 28K,
Yay.
and Van City, just under 30. So they demonstrated to those 2 bodies that they were deserving of support.
Great.
Thank
It might not be unhelpful, by the way, if Birch could submit
you. Here's an
that
update.
to us as well. Because it's all good background, especially if the finance people are going to consider it. If Van City and others saw fit to do that, we might, I don't know how they've elaborated their reasons, but it would certainly be valuable information to have in support.
I can ask that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
point number 2 was
That would be
really asking for more information
Yeah.
to support
Yeah.
their request for money.
Congratulations to Birch.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
Are
wonderful.
those in addition to the 50,000?
I believe so.
Yeah.
They were just announced today,
Okay.
David.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome. So new business, 10.
Sorry, we didn't have a vote on that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Any further discussion?
Hang on,
Okay.
to defer?
To
We need-
defer.
To defer,
Yeah.
we had a mover and a second.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, all in favor? See that? New business 10.1, we've deferred.
Yeah.
Keep that going. 10.2, Metro Vancouver Director David Hawking.
Okay, thanks, Gary. I sent an email around after the last Metro Vancouver meeting about the $4 for housing, and that will be going to a budget workshop in the middle of next week. I guess then they'll vote after that, so we'll find out what happens with that and the money for parks. And then there was that water metering piece as well, but that's already been circulated by Hope, I think it was. I've been to 3 other committees, but One thing I just wanted to mention, when I talked about this Fraser Basin, the Lower Mainland Flood Management Leadership Committee, you know, obviously flooding coming down the Fraser is not an issue for Bowen, except that it would wipe out the infrastructure that we rely on. But we also need to know what the combination of storm surge and sea level rise is. And so I'm talking to the guy from the airport, and get this, 5.8 meters is the height of the dike. They're 5.8, that's 15 feet, like, yeah. Or 6 feet, that's nearly 20 feet, yeah, huge. So I was chatting with, and I've got some website I've gone to, I haven't been able to get the details, but this is something we need to find out.
So the provincial government website has quite a bit of modeling on it.
It does, and I went there and I could find, we don't need to get into details, I could find the details of any particular storm. Okay, there's a storm tomorrow, let's have a look, and we should be able to get the data. But it was the combination with the climate change, that the link was broken or something. So
Okay,
anyway,
well, I got it somewhere, so I'll,
okay, that'd be great,
Yeah.
awesome, yeah.
maybe I found it on the Fraser Basin County website.
Mr. Wellen?
I just wanted to mention, in one of our most recent meetings, we passed the tsunami hazard assessment.
Yes,
And if you look in there, you see, we don't have nearly the
I know.
exposure.
Yeah,
Anyway, that
exposure.
might help.
I was thinking it might help, that's why, because it's, you have to turn around the corner and so on.
Yeah,
So that's why I
just
just
might,
wanted to.
I was just gonna refer that to.
Yeah, no, I saw the same thing, the tsunami thing, and I realized, you know, we're in a different circumstance, but we also have coasts on all sides.
Oh, totally,
So,
yeah.
Yeah, I think Richmond would be particularly
Yeah.
vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because if you had a huge west wind and
Yeah.
a high tide and high surge, and it's impressive
Yeah.
that the water can go from, it could go from 5 meters to 15 meters, just like that,
It's
bang.
incredible, yeah.
And you had high tide too.
Yeah, king tides to it.
King tides.
Tides.
And a flood down the river at the same
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
Well, we already have
Black days.
water coming over the causeway in a king tide
Oh, geez.
on occasion.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we don't put out a notice about it or anything, you just kind of encounter it. It's like,
If I'm remembering correctly, one of the points that Harold Steves made on Sunday was that Richmond had estimated $600 million for the dike structure that they need.
How much? Sorry?
600 million.
Yeah.
Sounds for the Dutch.
So that's it for me, I think.
Okay, thanks, David. And I would trust municipal trustees passing payroll.
Sure, I'll just
Yeah.
mention that it's item 12.6 in our agenda is the annual report. So for all things Islands Trust about what we did last year and how things went and what they cost and all that kind of thing, the link is there. I think it's just called highlights, but it takes you to the council update, takes you to the annual report. And I have highlights here, but they'll be in the next agenda, so I'll just
Okay.
stick with those.
All right, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
It's probably for all, the resolution we passed at the last council meeting, has it been formally sent to the chair of the House?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, it has.
Forwarded it to CAO.
Hudson Pillar, we haven't had an executive committee meeting yet.
So did it go as a formal letter that council passed the following item?
She circulated it.
Oh, I totally missed that.
I got it.
Okay.
I can re-forward it to you.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to 10.4. Councillor Nicholson, Central Van.
There's nothing to report. We're meeting tomorrow morning at 9, so I'll have something for the next meeting.
All right, thank you. And Allison, Friends of the
Haven't
Mayor's
had any
Council.
meeting.
Nothing?
No meeting. And I
Okay.
actually didn't hear anything about it. So I presume it did happen.
Thank you.
I had a question.
Yes.
I'm just wondering about the big tunnel upgrade that was recently announced, the committee to the mayor's.
Oh, the Dees Tunnel?
Yes. And
That's a
and I'm wondering-
provincial thing, and the mayors are the mayors of that area that's serviced by the tunnel.
That's the committee?
Yeah.
Okay. And when does it come to the Translink Mayor's
It's a
Committee, council
provincial,
that you're on?
it's a provincial undertaking.
So it won't come to
We
the...
just get reports on status, and that they're still working.
Okay, thank you.
Right, items removed from the consent agenda, there are none. Right down to the end of the last page, which is question period.
No, I
Yeah.
have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
About the rate increase in the Cove Bay water system. Some people are throwing around numbers. Is there a number for how much it go up, or it's going to go up?
There is not yet. I will be going back to the Cove Bay LAC with a recommendation for an interim increase at the, is it the October 28th meeting?
Or the 23rd for the Cove Bay Water Committee.
Oh, sorry, October 23rd.
Is there any estimated cost?
Well, on the website.
That you can be quoted on.
On our website, we do have, under the questions, frequently asked questions on the capital project page, it does say based on current connections to the water, an increase by $230 per year per connected property. That's not.
That increase is what would be required to service the loan when the loan comes on board.
So,
Yeah, so it would be somewhere between, I mean, obviously we wouldn't go up to that, but to just give you an idea, somewhere between,
and that,
basically, yeah, probably close to 50% of that if it comes into servicing in year 2.
and that wouldn't come in, and you wouldn't bring that forward until after this October 21st deadline's passed, I guess?
It would come forward as part of our budget, basically as part of our financial plan recommendation to council after the LAC makes a recommendation on it.
But it would be kaput if this.
But it would be effective, a rate increase would be effective January 1st, or a proposed increase.
I think to answer your question, the AAP, if it fails, we will have to go to referendum.
And so then you wouldn't be implementing a rate increase if you haven't gone to referendum.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Wouldn't be nice.
Okay.
Wouldn't be doing it.
The muddled mean numbers.
All right, well, thank you very much. That brings this one to a close. We've got one more little one. Let's take 5 minutes, please, council, and we'll reconvene. Thank you.